Hey there, everyone. Welcome back to Utility Sports. We've got big news today. The NBA just never sleeps. It never lets me rest, especially. I was getting ready to record some other videos, and then all of a sudden, De'Aaron Fox, here he is, potentially going to get traded this trade deadline. Not something I was expecting. In fact, if you watched my trade deadline predictions video last week, you would have heard me say that I thought De'Aaron Fox was not getting traded. And I thought the recent winning streak that the Kings have been on, where they've been winning a good deal of games, a good number of games, especially after the Mike Brown firing, I thought maybe things were good to go in Sacramento, at least for the near future. Maybe not long term, but I thought at least they had bought themselves some time with De'Aaron Fox and his future there. However, with reports coming out that the Kings have actually taken a couple of calls on De'Aaron Fox, there are real rumors and speculation out here right now, including Charania report, which I'm going to read for you right now. Just in, the Sacramento Kings are expected to open up talks to potentially deal all-star guard De'Aaron Fox ahead of the February 6th trade deadline. Reminder, I will be live on the channel the entire week of the NBA trade deadline next week, so this is the best place for you to be. Leave a like and subscribe so you don't miss out on more uploads and streams coming up in the near future. There will be plenty of suitors, but it's believed that Fox has a target destination in mind ahead of 2026 free agency. Welcome, everyone in here. Nathan Drake, Tomas, welcome. Melverk, welcome to the stream. Appreciate all of you guys so much. Tyler says, what's up? Glad to have you in here, Tyler. Firkin Korkmaz. Whoa, we got Firkin Korkmaz in here. He says, Houston Suns and Lakers trade for him. I don't know if the Suns and Lakers will actually be able to get involved from a draft asset standpoint. They just probably do not have enough. Houston would be an interesting destination for sure. Brendan says, can't go a week without some Kings chaos. That is the truth. The Kings got to king it up in some ways. No hate to my Kings fans, by the way. You guys know I've been rooting for the Kings for a while, but just kind of starts from the top down there with the ownership, and things just do not tend to last very long and go super well for the Kings. Sam here says, Rockets got to pull the trigger, but I think there's a good chance the Kings wait till the offseason. They definitely could do that, but there is something really important. I just want to welcome everyone to the stream real quick before we get into that. Terrence says, do the Lakers have enough to trade for him? Probably not, honestly. ZJ says, let's go Spurs. Alex Rodriguez says, what's up, Luca? I've been hearing that all over the place in my comment section. Even people in real life have been hooping with a lot of guys, some really athletic players too, and I get called Luka Doncic. I think it's because I'm slow. And also my footwork's pretty solid. I guess I'll take that credit there too. Sheldon Norris says, just checking in as a fellow Sheldon. Glad to have you in the stream here, my man. Damos wants to know about the Warriors. We'll talk about that as a potential destination, although, I think the Warriors are less likely. Aquino Asia says, W Stream, talk to me about Denver. We'll see if the Nuggets get involved. They would be a sneaky under-the-radar team, but I'm just not sure anything is going to actually happen. There are a lot of hyped people in the chat, a lot of Spurs fans, and this could realistically change the playoff picture if he gets traded from Sacramento. One, it could really hurt the Kings' chances of making the playoffs this year with how bunched up the West is, from about the 6 or 7 seed all the way down to the 11 seed Warriors right now. It is very, very tight, but we got a lot of Spurs fans in here. And then Leon wants to know if the Nets have a chance to get Fox. We're going to talk about all of that and more. I just wanted to welcome everyone to the stream. Appreciate all of you for leaving comments, and make sure to leave a like. We have over 100 people already watching live in the first 4 minutes of this stream. Make sure you guys go and leave a like as well. I would really appreciate that. Could the Raptors squeeze in somehow? Very possibly. We're going to talk about every single possible trade that you need to see. Let me pull up Fanspo here right now too, just so you guys know we are planning on getting to that at some point in time. But the key thing here, and this is what we need to really talk about, 2026 free agency. And this is where we get to something called pre-agency. Now, if you watch my immediate reaction to this De'Aaron Fox trade, you've heard me go on this spiel already, but just listen to me, hear me out on this in case you have heard it. And if you haven't, this is super important. This is pre-agency. This is where De'Aaron Fox essentially gets an early say at where he wants to spend the next contract he's on in the NBA. Right now, De'Aaron Fox, even though he's under contract with the Sacramento Kings, has a little bit of leverage to force his way somewhere else. And where could that somewhere else be? Well, right now the rumors are San Antonio, Brooklyn, some want to know Golden State, maybe Miami somehow through Jimmy Butler, of course the Houston Rockets with that H-Town connection. There's options, right? But Whatever that destination is, De'Aaron Fox has a little bit more leverage than he normally would. When, say, Damian Lillard requested his trade, he had already signed an extension with the Portland Trailblazers. So his both near and distant future were already certain. He was under contract. He was going to have to play for whichever team traded for him, which is why he ultimately did not end up in Milwaukee. Callum, thank you so much for the 5. Says we love him on the Rockets. Hope you're keeping well. Doing great over here. Really, really excited for the trade deadline specifically and all the streams that are coming up. Callum, really appreciate you and your continued support here at Utility Sports. Huge shout out. Let's get some W's for Callum in the chat right now. Let's get those in there. I'm going to start us off here. I'm going to hit us off with a W, Callum. Let's get some W's for Callum in the comment section right now. He is an absolute beast for that. So when it comes to his free agency here, back with De'Aaron Fox, the reason he has a say now, unlike what Damian Lillard did, where Damian Lillard did not end up in Miami, he ended up in Milwaukee, about as far of a geographical difference in the Eastern Conference as you could almost get. The reason he ended up there is because he was already under contract for so long, he basically had no real say over his future. De'Aaron Fox, what he can do is tell teams, hey, by the way, you can trade for me. I'll show up and finish out my contract for you. I'm not going to, screw you over like that. But 18 months from now, you don't get to keep me because I'm going to walk in free agency. So realistically, when it comes to trading for a player of the caliber of De'Aaron Fox, where it's going to take 3+ first-round picks and a young player and matching contract salaries, it's very, very difficult to actually work out a deal that makes sense for a team that risks losing him in a year and a half. And that's why he has control over his future, because he can say, well, if I want to play in San Antonio or if I want to play in Brooklyn, I can guarantee essentially that I'm going to get there. And this brings me back to something I've been saying for a while now. This is December 29th, 2024. So about a month ago now. But if you've been watching me on the channel, you've been watching my videos, you know I've talked about this in the past too. Whichever NBA star is smart enough to say, I'm only willing to re-sign with San Antonio, so trade me to the Spurs, will reap the benefits of playing with the top 5 player in the history of the game. And when we go look at my recent quote of this, De'Aaron Fox might be the answer to this tweet. De'Aaron Fox might be the star that is smart enough and aware enough of saying, if I get with that guy, oh my goodness. Let me see if I can find the viral photo quick. I almost did it in Portuguese. Whoops. Viral photo of De'Aaron Fox and Victor Wembanyama. This one, this is just crazy. Let's get it up on Instagram here. I don't know why it's so blurry, but look at the height difference between these two guys. This is just like he makes De'Aaron Fox look like a little kid, and De'Aaron Fox is like 6'3", which is hilarious. But De'Aaron Fox might be the guy who's smart enough to realize that tying the remainder of his career to Victor Wembanyama's prime is a genius idea. And the Spurs, who are already, I think, overcoming a lot of their age issues, and both in terms of being old and young, some of their players on roster are past their prime. You think about some of their pieces like Chris Paul, Harrison Barnes, guys who are definitely past their prime in their NBA lifespans. And then you also think about some guys who are pretty much babies in their NBA lives, where, Stephon Castle's a rookie. Jeremy Sohan's a young player still. You think about Devin Vassell, who, he's, I think, starting to enter his prime a little bit, getting closer and closer every day to that. But and Wemby's just in his second season. So you think about that perspective where San Antonio has so many young players. They could be an interesting team with how well they're playing despite being young and old simultaneously. You get a player like De'Aaron Fox who is really in his prime. And I think if we look at De'Aaron Fox's numbers here too, people are going to be impressed with the overall sheer numbers. Like, he's averaging 25 plus points a game. Now, he's not shooting the three very well this year, just 32.4% from three. But he's shooting it well from the stripe. I don't think that's too shocking. His win share numbers all look good. And I mean, he's doing his normal thing where he's, getting in the assist column. He's on the box score in pretty much every single way that you could really want. And, Swipe is a good player. You don't have to look at the box score to know that, because his rim pressure, downhill force, everything like that is always super impressive and super important. So when it comes to possible trades, I think this is where a lot of you want to know what's going on. John, welcome to the stream. Glad to have you in here. Brad Van Vliet, funny name, says Vassell is underrated in my opinion. I agree. Fronte Shek says, if it is the Spurs, kind of mixed feelings, amazing talent, but such a huge risk so early into Wemby's era. And this is the thing here too. Could be definitely a risk, but I am really in the belief system that the Spurs have so many assets that they can afford to take a risk. So here's the Spurs' current collection of players. Let's take a look at this first, because I think this is important to know. They have Vassell, they have Keldon Johnson's contract, which is very useful in trades. They have Harrison Barnes' contract, Zach Collins' contract. These three contracts right here, Keldon, Barnes, and Collins, any combination of two of these three players gets them to the money for De'Aaron Fox. So let's go ahead and throw the Kings into this trade too. And you see De'Aaron Fox making a little bit over $34 million this season. If we were to do some combination of, say, Keldon Johnson plus Zach Collins, you're looking at the money working here. This deal financially works, right? So that's an important thing. And it's also important to note that the Kings do have apron space to make a deal like this. So the Kings have flexibility. Now they are hard capped at the first apron, but they have that apron space to take in, up to $4.5+ million back in like extra money over what De'Aaron Fox is making this year. So a deal like this financially works. Now you could also say, well, they are going to want a younger player in here. So like it might not be Zach Collins, right? It could be something where they want Stephon Castle. And now the Spurs really have to think about this. Do they actually want to give up Stephon Castle, who they just picked in the top 10 this past year? And then the money here doesn't even work. So you're looking at throwing in other players. Could be a Malachi Branham and a Blake Wesley to get the money to work. Now you're trading 4 players for 1, but San Antonio, with how much apron space they have, they could do that and just sign guys to fill out the rest of the roster. It's a 4-for-1 trade, which is messy, to be honest. But, something like this could work. You could also take out maybe Blake Wesley and do something else. But then this is where the picks really matter. And this is why San Antonio is a realistic landing spot for someone like De'Aaron Fox, okay? Because they have so many draft picks. They have so many draft picks. Also, shout out to Draft Point. He is doing a lot of great work over on Twitter. Says, what's up, man? Hoping Miami can finally make the move for Fox. Hopefully with Jimmy and Rozier getting moved somewhere else in the mix. That would be awesome for Miami. We'll talk about the Heat as a potential suitor. Of course, those trade packages will look quite messy because it's probably going to be 4, 5, 6 team trades if we're trying to find a way to send Jimmy somewhere that isn't Sacramento, and we're trying to find matching salary for this guy to go where, and then Miami then getting De'Aaron Fox means the Kings are involved. It would be a very convoluted thing, but we'll talk about that for sure. We definitely will. Again, huge shout out to Draft Point. Alex Rodriguez says, I think Trae Young will be involved. I'm not sure if Trae Young's getting moved anywhere this year. He's had a good season for sure. So, especially passing the basketball, he leads the NBA in assists by a mile this year. So, Brett Van Vliet says, how many firsts if he's forcing his way and signing there anyways? And this is the thing. San Antonio, if you look at their cap specifically, so De'Aaron Fox is on a 2-year deal. This is where things are, again, very important. The Spurs can really place this pressure because Harrison Barnes is on a 2-year contract, Zach Collins is on a 2-year contract, and Keldon Johnson's money is not very large. So, realistically, if the Spurs wanted to, they could operate as a team with significant cap space in a couple of seasons and threaten the Kings as just an outright landing spot for De'Aaron Fox in free agency. Now, there are reasons why De'Aaron Fox will not want to do that. First of all, you would lose bird rights. If he leaves in free agency, he's not going to have bird rights, which means San Antonio can offer him significantly less than they could with an extension and significantly less than Sacramento could with an extension. The other thing is, if you're San Antonio, if you have the ability to get a trade done for an all-star guard, you should probably do it, because if you risk him getting to free agency, either another third team could get involved or Sacramento could throw a bag at him and say, are you going to really pass up on an extra $77 million to play in San Antonio rather than stay here in Sacramento? And when you make that kind of decision, if you're San Antonio and you don't make that big trade, you are risking just him re-signing in Sacramento or signing with a different team. Now, again, if you have Victor Wembanyama, you have to feel good that you're going to be an attractive market to other players, which is what I was talking about earlier. But you still also run that risk, and that's important to note. The Mavericks with Dirk Nowitzki always thought they were a huge market, but then Dwight Howard chose Houston over Dallas. Darren Williams chose to stay in Brooklyn over Dallas. There's been a bunch of different examples throughout NBA history where star players don't always net you another great player as well. So that's something I think that's very important to keep in mind. So trading for De'Aaron Fox, if you have the ability to do that, you should really strongly at least consider that. And again, from a pick perspective, let's say we throw in that Atlanta first this year. The Hawks have been like a middling team. They've been pretty good. That pick's going to be anywhere from pick 12 to pick 18, probably. The Spurs could include their own first-round pick. We're already at 2 firsts. We might as well go on and throw in the Chicago first. So they could offer 3 first-round picks this year, which is one of the unique things that San Antonio could actually afford to do. Now, this pick has a protection from the Bulls. It becomes less protected next year with still some form of protection on it. Funny enough, that's from the DeMar DeRozan trade. And then let's go down to where this Kings pick is, which is a swap rights. They could return that to Sacramento so that the Kings no longer owe that swap rights out the door to San Antonio. And then, so we're kind of looking at like 3.5 first-round picks here and Stephon Castle. Like, this deal probably is like an accepted deal, right? 3 first-round picks, return of a swap rights, and Stephon Castle and Keldon Johnson. Like, this is a really, really, really strong offer, honestly. Like, this is a very strong offer, I think, for De'Aaron Fox. This is like the offer that would get the deal done, I think. Now, again, the Spurs are going to have arguments over if they actually want to include Stephon Castle. So maybe Stephon Castle is not included. Maybe you look at Trey Jones's money being involved in the deal instead as kind of like a solid backup point guard. Something like this, like, deal kind of works, right? Where you get to this kind of money, you get to this kind of point where Fox is going out the door to San Antonio. The Spurs have the ability to take an extra cap salary. The Kings also open up a little bit of financial flexibility from this. And the Kings get a young player in Keldon Johnson. They get an okay young player in Trey Jones. And they get 2 unproven probable projects in Malachi Branham and Blake Wesley, 2 guys who I don't think have elite futures moving forward. And listen, and yes, Stephon Castle, listen, right now he isn't an established star. Like, to Caleb's point here, he's not an established star, but it's also his rookie season. And like Brian's saying here, you don't want to judge a 20-year-old player, a 19-year-old player, especially for a guard, just on their first season, because that is how you end up oftentimes losing long-term value. I think, it's proven so many times over and over and over again that guards take a little bit of time to develop. And if you're going to be a team like San Antonio, I think, first of all, defensively, Stephon Castle projects to be an elite defender alongside Victor Wembanyama. The event creation is going to be there. The screen nav is already there. And then offensively, like, it's been really rough his rookie season, but he's also been a pretty solid rim finisher, apart from a few bunnies that he's missed and a few, kind of games where things aren't going well for him. Now the shooting's been horrible. There's been a lot of problems, but I think, again, if you're pointing to development, like, you don't just judge him off of his rookie season. We've been watching him for years as a prospect. Obviously, shined last year with UConn as en route to winning a national championship with the Huskies. So the Spurs have ways to get there, but like the biggest thing here too, this is what people are questioning, I guess, is like 7th seed great. Why would you want to be mediocre? Listen, people are judging De'Aaron Fox on like what he's been with Sacramento. There's a very big two-way difference between playing with Domantas Sabonis, who I'm a big fan of, by the way. I think Domantas Sabonis is a great player. There's a significant difference between Sabonis and Wembanyama, though, long-term. Wembanyama is going to be arguably the best player in the league very, very soon. He's already someone who should be garnering some MVP consideration. Now, he won't win it. Probably won't even finish in the top 4, maybe not even the top 5 this year. But he's someone that people should be considering because the Spurs are pretty darn good when he's on the court. He is their best offensive player. He is their best defensive player. He's arguably the best defensive player in the world already. Some people were even making that case last year, which I wasn't super against. Now, I thought they got it right with Gobert winning Defensive Player of the Year. I got to see him a lot in person last year too, Gobert. So that's, maybe I'm a little biased, and maybe not biased, but I got to see up close and personal how Gobert impacted games, and I don't think every single fan in the NBA got to see that as much. Let's be honest. Not the national media and a lot of fans aren't watching Timberwolves games every night, but I did. So that was something where I think like Wemby and Fox together would be really, really good. If you've watched Chris Paul and Wembanyama together this year, there's a lot to work with from a 2-man game, from kind of the difference that Fox would provide San Antonio in terms of rim pressure, shot making compared to this current version, modern version of Chris Paul. If you had prime Chris Paul with Wembanyama, that would be absolute showtime. It'd be so much fun to watch. But at this point in his career, Chris Paul is just a lesser player. He's still good. He's been a positive player for the Spurs all season. But Fox would be really, really awesome with Wembanyama. They could make the playoffs this year. And I don't think any team in the league would want to see Wembanyama in a 7-game series, even if they're not going to win the first round. If San Antonio made it, like, they'd still be very, very tough. And to Tim's point here, like, Spurs fans are not going to want to give up Stephon Castle, which is exactly what I'm trying to say here, which is why maybe something like this could make some sense where Trey Jones becomes expendable if you're adding a ball handler like De'Aaron Fox. there's significant upgrade opportunities here for San Antonio for sure. What I do want to talk about here, though, really quickly, by the way, go follow us on Twitter. Link is in the description. People want to know about the Brooklyn Nets, and why would the Brooklyn Nets make some actual sense for De'Aaron Fox? Well, first of all, he has a connection with Jordi Fernandez. Fernandez was the top assistant coach under Mike Brown there in Sacramento. Now, of course, Brown got fired this year. Jordi Fernandez dipped in the offseason over to Brooklyn, and I think has already proven himself to be a very good young NBA head coach. Has found a lot of success with the Brooklyn Nets early this season, despite an untalented roster. Now the roster has been being kind of picked apart in trades, with Schroeder traded, Dorian Finney-Smith being traded, and now also the likelihood that Cam Johnson gets dealt at some point. But the Nets have a bunch of expiring contracts, which could be valuable in a De'Aaron Fox trade for Sacramento. Gets them out of salary, opens up their salary cap book moving forward, which maybe could be valuable to them. Yes, 11 expiring contracts, which is crazy. One of them being Cam Thomas, who's a restricted free agent. Could he be included in some type of deal? That would be unique and interesting. And the Nets could also be potential long-term suitors for Giannis. If Giannis and the Bucks don't go far in the playoffs this year, you'd have to wonder what his future looks like in Milwaukee. So I think that's kind of the idea here. The Nets have more first-round picks than pretty much anybody. They have a ton of second-round picks. Like if we go over here, we're going to pivot off the Spurs quick, and we're going to pivot over to the Brooklyn Nets. Look at it. They have 31 total draft picks, and you compare that to the Kings, who have 10 over the next 6.5 years, right? Like, it's pretty massive difference. And the Nets got all the picks in the world from the Mikal Bridges trade. They got a ton of picks from the Kevin Durant trade with Phoenix. They're in line to potentially get more picks with the Cam Johnson trade. And they have a big salary too. They have Ben Simmons, for example. Like, now this is going to, Kings fans are not going to like getting Ben Simmons in return, but he's an expiring salary, right? Like, this is where a deal, like if they tell the Nets, well, you have to take Kevin Huerter's contract back, and then, you figure out the money along the way, like whatever's got to be included, right? We get out of whatever, like whatever the deal ends up looking like, you would go into the next season with De'Aaron Fox, Nick Claxton, maybe Cam Johnson if you keep him. And, we'll just throw Zaire Williams into the deal because whatever, just to make the money work. And then you throw in first, throw in another first, you throw in this first. Now, obviously, they're going to be more selective on which actual first go and which ones don't, right? But, like, here's an example. This is 5 first-round picks. And Ben Simmons, Zaire Williams, and Cam Thomas for De'Aaron Fox and Kevin Huerter. The Kings, the big thing here is getting Cam Thomas. Now, these firsts aren't all going to be valuable, right? And the Nets wouldn't trade their first-round pick. So let me actually go fix that, because that would not happen. That would just not be part of the trade. But something like this, right? 4 firsts and Cam Thomas for De'Aaron Fox seems like really great value. And I don't think that's going to be something that, I mean, like getting 4 first-round picks for De'Aaron Fox is not bad. Well, yeah, like, so Jordan, let me, this is another good question here. So people are saying, well, why would De'Aaron Fox want to go to Brooklyn? Again, the idea is that in the offseason, if the Bucks flame out again, they could do something like this, where this guy also goes to the Nets and in return goes out, well, the thing is the Nets are going to have cap space too. So that's like something you have to consider here. The Nets would basically get this guy into cap space, Giannis, and they'd have to maybe send out some other salary. So just in this, we're going to do this, right? And we'll throw in, like, and this is where the first round picks become incredibly valuable, where you're like, oh yeah, they still have this one, they still have this one, and they still have this one, and oh, by the way, they also have this 2029 first. Oh, and by the way, they have this 2030 first that they could trade, and oh, by the way, they have 2031 first from New York. And you're like looking at this and realizing, oh, they could give up, look at how many picks they're giving up here. 2, 4, 6, 8, 9 first-round picks for 2 players. Now, it's going to say money doesn't work. It's because of the Nets money here. But, like, this is kind of the point here. Like, they're within $6 million. Like, we could actually just go make this work right now, just to prove the point on this being, like, a feasible thing that could actually, like, happen. Let's just throw in Dariq Whitehead to the Bucks, and we'll throw in Keon Johnson to the Bucks, for example. And we do something like this, and it's going to say, Yeah, okay, $846,000. So let me go fix that real quick too, just because some people, if they don't actually see it work, they're going to say, well, that doesn't work. But trust me, it's doable. It's doable. This is, again, hard cap. Like, this is where the expiring salaries that the Nets would get off of is, like, the point. And the Nets would go into next year with Giannis and De'Aaron Fox and ways to improve their team. Is Fox a solid? He's, like, middle of the road, maybe slightly below average. Callie Trucker says, yeah, give us Dame for Fox. I don't know if you're going to get Damian Lillard. Well, I mean, it's not the craziest idea, I guess. Dark Aeon says, in all seriousness, Spurs need to get rid of their first-round picks. I mean, I think having those first-round picks in the future is very smart. Let's go back over to San Antonio quick. We'll reset all of this, and I shouldn't have taken the Kings out. But let's just go back to San Antonio because, again, we're talking about different destinations. The Spurs have 36 picks, and I think the biggest, most important ones are these future ones. 2031, they have their own. 2031, they have Minnesota. 2031, they have swap rights with Sacramento. 2030, they have either via Dallas or Minnesota. These are swap rights. 2030, they have their own first-round pick. So you're looking at the far-out future assets. They have a lot of flexibility to continue improving their team while Wembanyama's in his prime, which is very, very impressive. Kevin O'Connor says, who says no? Spurs get De'Aaron Fox. Kings get Colin Sexton 2 first. Jazz get Keldon Johnson. Kevin Huerter 2 first, 2 seconds. I mean, why would I just don't really see the point of this trade, I guess, for Sacramento. Like, I just don't know, really. I wouldn't do that if I was Sacramento. Like, Colin Sexton and John Collins are good players, but 4 quarters don't make a dollar in the NBA. That's one thing that I think everyone needs to learn. You could trade for good players like Colin Sexton, John Collins. They're not going to replace the void left by De'Aaron Fox, who's averaging 25 points a game. And the reason for that is you still only play 5 guys at a time in the NBA. So having 9 good players, while it helps you in the regular season, your best lineups are 5-man lineups. And that's something that I think is super important. The BMAX says also when Wemby gets hurt and turns into Yao Ming, they'll need them. I don't think that's going to happen with Wemby. He's got a lot of flexibility. His joints, I think, are going to be very strong. His tendons are very well built. I think, this is something I talked about in his draft class a lot. Like, people are going to look at his thin, wiry frame and say he's going to get injured a lot. I mean, he's been relatively healthy through 2 years already, and I think he's going to get stronger. I think he's going to be, maintain some of his flexibility that he's built up. So, Red Van Vliet says, no need to kick the contention can to accumulate picks when you can make noise now. I mean, making noise now and keeping picks in the future is what San Antonio is doing. So they're doing a little bit of both. Star Traffic says Fox is so overrated, he doesn't impact winning. That's just not really true. I think Fox is a pretty good player. He's not an elite player. He's not a top 10 star in the league, but he's very, very good. So, Mr. Doncic, tell me how to make the Heat deal work. Please have Rozier go somewhere. Okay, let's look at Miami because I promised we would do that. We talked about Brooklyn and the reason for that and why that could be something that, in theory, could open up. And now we look at Miami, and this is where things get really ridiculous. So the real issue here is we need Jimmy Butler to go somewhere. And I think with the recent rumors, we've talked about the Phoenix Suns situation to death. If you don't know what I think on that, go to my YouTube, go find me talking about Jimmy Butler to the Suns. We've beaten that, that's like a dead horse at this point. We've beaten it to death. So what we're going to do is talk about Jimmy to Golden State. And this is where things are complicated because De'Aaron Fox does not make as much money as Jimmy Butler. But in this, De'Aaron Fox goes to Miami, okay? Now, the idea here is with this being significantly less, the Warriors would trade 1 first-round pick and it would go to the Sacramento Kings because they're not going to give up a ton for Jimmy Butler. Okay, that's kind of the idea here. What they're also going to do now is have to match salary in this deal. So Andrew Wiggins goes to the Kings in this deal. This is where things start to get very, very tricky and very tight very quickly because the Kings, after trading De'Aaron Fox, they're going to be looking for picks. And the Heat have some picks, but not really because they owe their 2025 first with a backup protection in 2026. They owe their 2027 first with a backup protection in 2028. So by rule, they cannot trade 2029, which means that they can trade 2030. And now you're kind of looking at this and you're saying, oh, okay, this is kind of tricky. And now you're trying to find a Rozier trade. Like, I don't know who's going to really want Rozier. I didn't love the Rozier trade for Miami a year ago. I understood that they were trying to make a win now push, but it was kind of a foolish trade. One that I thought Charlotte did pretty well with. So when it comes to making money work here, now we need Golden State to dump about $22 million because they are very, very close to the first apron. And as you can see right now, they would be over that first apron number, which they can't be because they're hard capped there. So you have to include Gary Payton II. We'll trade him to the Heat. We'll trade Kyle Anderson to Sacramento in this deal, which works out financially for them. And then we're still, again, trying to shave off about $4.5 million. This is where, like, someone like Moses Moody, maybe Moses Moody goes to the Kings, although he's poison pilled, which makes this trade really not fun to do. So that's where things get even trickier. Maybe Kevon Looney goes to Miami. And again, the deal really doesn't work great here because of some of the restrictions. You see the first apron space, but this is where they're like kind of tricky now because the Heat probably have to send out a little bit more salary. Maybe they would send like Kevin Love to Golden State, for example. And something like this would theoretically work. Again, okay, well, this is the issue with some of these second apron things too, like because the Heat are a second apron team, they can't take in more money than they're giving up. So they have to send out one other player. So they probably wouldn't send Pele Larson. We'll send, that's not going to work either. We're going to send Alec Burks to the Kings. Okay. Something like this, then you throw in a bunch of second rounders, but this is the issue. Golden State doesn't have a bunch of draft assets to work with. The Heat don't have it. Well, the Warriors do, but they don't want to trade all that stuff for Jimmy Butler is the reality. And the issue here too is the Kings want probably more than this for De'Aaron Fox. So this is where things get tricky. I just don't really see a Heat Warriors trade coming to fruition, which means then you're getting involved in the trade with the Suns if you're trading Jimmy Butler to Phoenix. But again, that has a real mess. So this report here saying Beal declined the Bulls, that's not a real report. I know you saw Evan Sidery say that. Don't trust that. That's not a real thing yet. So it's like this is just it's not done. Bradley Beal is going to play difficult here. So I would just say be patient on all this. So Kelly Trucker says we really should not trade Fox for Butler because then we'll have two old guys on our team and no way to rebuild. So Kelly Trucker, the idea would be that you don't trade for Jimmy Butler. It's you're involved in a 3-team trade where Jimmy Butler goes to some other team. So Kings play-by-play says, I just saw the news. I hope this doesn't happen. Evan is not super credible. No, I would not trust his reports. It's okay. Like the whole point of us having some of these conversations right now is so you guys know who to trust. Like if Evan reports something, there's like a 40% chance it's accurate because he steals a lot of reports from other people. But then he also like sometimes makes up his own stuff. And like another guy who does that, I'm not going to say his name. I actually used to work with him. But if you see this name on Twitter, be careful. Okay, that's not going to be accurate. He doesn't know the CBA. He doesn't know the rules. So yeah, that's kind of that situation. Yeah, I don't follow him myself, Teasery, just so you're aware. I follow Sham Charania, and like someone out like Windhorse would be good to follow. Trejo the Great says, is it confirmed that he wants to go to San Antonio? No, it's not confirmed. Now that is the speculation. But when it comes to actual confirmation on where that preferred landing spot is, I do think San Antonio is one that very likely makes sense. But again, it really comes down to what this guy says. If Sham Charania, who I'm not going to unfollow, he has very good reporting. Okay, what he is going to say is what's going to be very accurate. Okay, so Edward wants to know if the Rockets can somehow get Fox. And Alex wants to know trade Fox to OKC idea. That's not going to happen. Oklahoma City has essentially no interest in trading for De'Aaron Fox. Mr. Ray says the Texas connection is the thing that makes me think he wants to land in San Antonio. That's where also Houston could make some sense. Like if we look up where is De'Aaron Fox from, this is where like you're going to find some stuff. Okay. Let's look up specifically Houston. Okay, these are all reports. Searching this now is not going to work very, very good because of all the rumors. Yeah, but his wife is from San Antonio specifically. Jordan is what. That's the big thing there, and then obviously the Houston stuff is legit. Keith Smith's okay. Yeah, Keith Smith has some good stuff. Good Hair says, really hope the Spurs don't try and get Fox. I think he'd be expensive. The Kings will probably want a bunch of picks and Castle or Vassell Sohan. Yeah, this is what I was looking for, Jordan. Thank you for putting it in there. That's what I was trying to find, but of course, looking that up now is going to just give me trade rumors. So, yeah, Sham said the Lakers would not be that team, which is what Damos is saying here, and I think that's the validity there. And when it comes to this is kind of the same issue when it comes to seeing De'Aaron Fox get traded to the Warriors. This is something I talked about earlier this year. Like, again, when it comes to financially, like a deal like this money-wise works. Now, you could argue maybe they would want to keep Kyle Anderson because he's a little bit bigger. Like Gary Payton II could be the guy involved to make money work. This kind of deal does work because the Kings the Warriors need to be sending out essentially more money than they're getting back, which is what they're doing in this deal. And then it would be something like this, where instead of this 2026 first, maybe it would be a 2025 first, 2027 first, and then you could maybe get into some stipulations about this being like lottery protected, right? So, something like this. But again, the issue here, also here. See, this is the thing I don't like about this. Like, the website itself doesn't really have all the reality in place. So let's just make this a swap option, okay? I'll protect less favorable, trade that to the Kings. So this is a swap. Then we could also make like this a swap, for example. So 2 firsts, 2 swaps to Sacramento. Again, it's saying the same thing, but it doesn't, like this would be a swap option. So this doesn't, even though the site has all the details, it doesn't have all the details completely correct. And I'm not going to go through the work of explaining that too much more. But the idea here is that De'Aaron Fox goes to Sacramento, goes from Sacramento, to Golden State. But the issue here is the Warriors would be really, really thin at some of their forward spots, especially trading Andrew Wiggins. They'd be pretty small, which is something they already are. Fox would be a significant talent upgrade, but the Warriors have to ask themselves, is this a deal that actually enhances the Warriors enough from being the 11th seed in the West to actually being a contender? And if no, then that's kind of a problem, right? Callie Trucker says, Fox and Ola give us Brandon Ingram. I don't think you want Brandon Ingram, especially not with DeMar DeRozan. That would be a problem. Booker and Fox to Houston would be a dream. So let's talk about the Houston Rockets. There's a couple of different ways to get a deal done here between the Rockets and Kings. The first one would be centered around Fred VanVleet. And while this would be somewhat of a hit for Rockets fans, they would say, Fred VanVleet's our leader. Fred VanVleet's a good defender. The young guys like Fred VanVleet. This is a significant talent upgrade. Okay, De'Aaron Fox is way better than Fred VanVleet at this point in time. Way better. So then it comes to matching money. This is one of the tricky things here too, where the money doesn't really match. So it would either be the Kings would want the Rockets to take in Kevin Huerter, or they would want Trey Lyles in the deal. And I think Kevin Huerter is the one that makes sense. So we're going to include him. And what we're going to do is send Jock Landale back. And you might be saying, well, the Kings won't want Jock Landale's contract. Here's the thing. His contract, I'm not sure if this site's going to have it correct or not. These orange years are non-guaranteed. So he's essentially an $8 million expiring contract. So you look at the money here between these two, it's almost a dollar for dollar swap, which is exactly what you want. And the Rockets have a bunch of firsts. They have their first this year. They have an asset in 2027 that they could trade. And then they have this Nets swap option in 2027. And what this would ultimately do is set them up in a position to go get De'Aaron Fox, add some shooting. Kevin Huerter might not play for them if we're being honest. But upgrade over Fred VanVleet at the cost of 3 first-round picks. 1 this year, 2 in 2027, 1 being swap rights. Well, so actually this is kind of the problem here too. So those swap rights, like if Houston gets rid of the swap rights, like there's a lot of intricacies that what we're going to just do is take this away and make this a 2029 first from Houston that's getting traded instead of that 2027, just for clarity's sake. Because if you're the Kings, spreading out your first for a couple of years might make more sense anyway. And this is a deal that could make some sense for both sides. So Mr. Ray says, drop a like if you're just popping in. I'm actually going to check real quick now. I want to see how many likes we're at on the stream. I'm going to take a quick look at that. We're at 48 likes, but we have 249 people watching live. So we should be getting at least double that number, at least. Let's get to 100 likes right now. Everyone, take 1 second and hit that like button right now. Subscribe as well if you're new. John G says, what would be the difference between the Spurs trading for Fox now versus in the offseason? So, John, one of the differences between trading for him now and in the offseason is, one, you get him for an extra few months. And this is a really good question, and one that I do think I need to actually fully address. So the difference is, you get him now, you make sure you get him before some other team who has some type of playoff failure this year decides that they really want him and they're going to push for him and try and convince him to stay. Again, when you have an opportunity to trade for an all-star level player, typically you don't squander that opportunity. You don't want to wait on it. But then secondly, the part of the difference is you still have a chance at making the playoffs. And while the Spurs, that might not be their internal plan, that internal desire, and I've talked about this before, how the Spurs are probably okay if they miss the playoffs one more year with Wembanyama to give them another lottery pick around Wemby, making the playoffs and giving playoff experience to some of your young players, to Vassell, to Stephon Castle, if he's still on your roster after a Fox trade, to Wembanyama, his first playoff experience. All of that stuff and early chemistry, like Mr. Ray is saying, would probably help them push for the playoffs. You'd have to think Sacramento maybe falls down the standings a little bit, moves out of the playoff positioning, and San Antonio might leapfrog up a little bit higher because when we look at the NBA standings specifically, let me pull them up now just so everyone can see them. In the West, the Kings are the 10 seed, and the Spurs, just very narrowly behind them, 2.5 games, are the 12. So you might be able to get into the play-in. You might even be able to sneak into the playoffs. So you look at how Dallas has been playing with their injuries over the last 10 games. They're 4-6 in that stretch. The Suns have been playing a lot better as of late, but they're a volatile team. They go up and down. Minnesota's had kind of an up and down shaky season. So you look at how tightly bunched the 6 seed is in the West, all the way to the 11 or 12 seed. If you factor in San Antonio improving with De'Aaron Fox, it's possible that the Kings could get worse and that the Spurs would get better, maybe sneak into the play-in or playoff. And John G says, well, let's do it, but not for Castle. And I think, again, it comes down to what that package looks like. We've talked about this again at length. And while I think the Rockets are a team that would make sense because, again, what Houston could do next offseason is trade those Suns picks and Jalen Green and other stuff for Devin Booker and try and pair Fox with Booker plus Amen Thompson plus Alperen Şengün moving forward. I think the reality here, and one that I think is very, very important to continue considering moving forward, is the Spurs just flat out being the team that De'Aaron Fox wants to go to. And again, going back to what I had said earlier, De'Aaron Fox just might be the guy who is smart enough to say that he wants to re-sign with San Antonio. So trade me to the Spurs, and he'll reap the benefits of playing with a top 5 player in the history of the game when it's all said and done, which is, again, something that I think is really genius for a player. So if we're talking about Fox going to San Antonio, again, there's a number of different ways we can get there. It won't be Harrison Barnes probably. Just would be awkward for Sacramento because they literally just traded him this past offseason. I don't think the Kings would want Zach Collins. So again, you're looking probably at something like Keldon Johnson plus either Stephon Castle or Trey Jones, someone in this money range, right? $9 million. One of these two guys. Let me go back up here. Okay. That's really close money-wise to where you need to get. And then it could be a Malachi Branham plus like a Julian Champagnie, for example. And I know Spurs fans are going to want to give up Champagnie. Champagnie's been a solid player for them this year. But again, you're getting De'Aaron Fox, so it might be worth it. And then you give up this Atlanta first, maybe give up your own first this year, which would be a little bit of a sacrifice. But then you give up maybe this 2026 swap rights from Atlanta, and you maybe give up your own 2026 first as well if you're San Antonio kind of anticipating another jump forward. Again, you're looking at a deal that involves 3 first-round picks, a swap right, 2 young players in Keldon Johnson, Trey Jones, who could be long-term rotation pieces for Sacramento, a project young player, Malachi Branham, and another young-ish player in Julian Champagnie, who is a rotation guy. So, yeah, like Spurs fans aren't going to want to give up Castle. Kings fans are going to want Stephon Castle. Like a Stephon Castle, Devin Carter backcourt going forward would be really, really fun defensively. But again, like there's going to be a lot of hold up there for San Antonio. I just don't think San Antonio is going to be willing to trade De'Aaron Fox. So Damos here wants to know, after a Fox trade, what would you do if you are in the Kings situation? I think that's really tricky. The Kings are committed to, like, let's go pull up their cap table here quick. The Kings, as you can see, all my trade prep is pretty crazy here. All right, let's go over to the Sacramento Kings. And this is where things are tricky. They have Domantas Sabonis extended. Okay. This is why De'Aaron Fox has leverage, because he only has one more year left on his deal. DeRozan's under contract, although it's a small enough value that you could probably trade it. Malik Monk's under contract. Like, you don't have cap space this offseason. There's just, like, no way with these contracts on the book, right? So you're kind of at a point where if you trade De'Aaron Fox, like, first of all, if it's after a Fox trade, I need to know what the Fox trade is. If it's that trade with San Antonio we just did, it's like, I don't even know what the direction would be. Unless you're getting, like, a premier young player. Like, I think for Sacramento, trying to reverse engineer in some way the Domantas Sabonis Halliburton trade, where you almost like 1-for-1+ type of swap. Like, I don't even know if there's a great example of that right now in the league. But let's say like the Kings, like maybe the Kings look at it and say, if we could get Reed Shepherd, who is just the 3rd overall pick, right? Like maybe the Kings just say, we really like Reed Shepherd, and the Rockets aren't even playing Reed Shepherd right now. Like, maybe it could be something like Reed Shepherd plus expiring contracts from Houston. You look at the money here, you're already getting kind of close. Like, and then you throw in, some other, like Aaron Holiday, right? Some other smallish contract player gets you right into the ballpark. And then the Rockets give up like maybe one pick, right? Maybe like their 2027 first, or maybe like, this via Dallas or Phoenix in 2029. So, like something like this where, like the gamble here for the Kings is that Reed Shepherd's going to be a star level player. Like, this is something that, like, this is a ton of risk for Sacramento, because it really hinges on how good Reed Shepherd ends up becoming. I think Reed Shepherd with Domantas Sabonis would be tremendous. He would be really fantastic. The Rockets get a significant upgrade onto their roster right now. It does leave them in a spot where I just don't know if there's enough play time for everybody, because you're not trading Van Vliet. Like, I don't really think Houston would do this, but this is something I think San Antonio would like, or not San Antonio, Sacramento, would love to do, right? Or if you look at San Antonio, like maybe it is something like just flat out Stephon Castle plus Zach Collins. Money-wise, again, you're getting kind of tight here, but maybe, Trey Jones is in this deal just for the contracts and 1 first-round pick. And like Kings fans are going to say, well, that's extremely underwhelming. Again, I didn't put De'Aaron Fox in the trade. Whoops. De'Aaron Fox to San Antonio. There we go. So something like that, right? Where it's, if you want Stephon Castle, if you want some guy who's already been drafted, who you think you have a big belief in, like, that's something that you're going to take a bet on. And like to Brian's point, like if the Kings internally feel like there's going to be a wide range of how people feel about Reed Shepherd. Some people were calling him the next Steph Curry. I didn't ever really believe that. Now I think he has some like maybe fringe all-star type of upside where, like, if things go really well for him, his combination and blend of ball handling, shooting, and passing make him just a very reliable guard, someone who could be a high-level starting point guard with also off-ball skills. And if you put him next to Domantas Sabonis, that could be tremendous. It's like a bet on Reed Shepherd, ultimately. I don't know what you mean it's a trading ploy. I don't really know what that means. Ashley here says, I don't think Spurs get Fox without trading Castle. And that's where something like this could make sense. Where, again, if they're taking the bet on Stephon Castle, like if you're one of the people that believes Stephon Castle is all-star upside or can be some form of super high-quality caliber point guard, like this is the type of trade where Sacramento says, if you really like Stephon Castle, you go make this trade. Yeah, you're not getting all the draft equity, but maybe you think Stephon Castle can be the perfect point guard next to Domantas Sabonis, where the screen navigation tools help eliminate or mitigate some of Sabonis's defensive weaknesses, right? Like, there's a lot of different ways to think about it. Orlando, I don't really think Orlando is going to be a team that's in on De'Aaron Fox, ultimately. They would be interesting, Tyrus. And I do think, like, let's just go ahead and show it quick. Like Orlando could look for a guard. The thing is, I just don't know if they're in a market for a player who's making $35 million and is about to extend. And the reason I say that specifically, if we look at Franz Wagner's contract right now, this is why. Franz Wagner is making a lot of money over the next few years, and they're also going to pay Paulo Banchero pretty much the exact same contract, except it'll be a little bit more money. So I think that's going to be part of the problem. Ray here says, Spurs not trading Castle. They're all about growing their young guys. They're not going to give up their young guy. He's been absolutely killing it. I see that's the thing. That's where I think the trade talks get tricky here for De'Aaron Fox, because if you're the Kings, let's be real. If you're running the Sacramento Kings, would you trade him for anything less than Stephon Castle? Probably not. You'd want Stephon Castle for him. And if you're the Spurs, you don't want to give up Stephon Castle, which is why I think there's going to be kind of real headbutting here between teams talking through a trade. Xavier here says, don't think he should go to the Rockets. It's always one hit year wonders. I mean, I don't know. Like, De'Aaron Fox is pretty darn good. If you look at De'Aaron Fox's clutch numbers, let's go over to NBA.com quick, just so I can pull this up. But De'Aaron Fox's numbers are very, very good in the clutch. Pretty much every single year of the last 3-4 years. He's been one of the clutch beast players. Again, if we look at points per game in the clutch, great. So this is going to have issues. Games play, we're going to do greater than 7. He's right now, this is where he ranks. 3.4 points in the clutch. His field goal percentage really good. 3-point percentage really good. Free throw percentage very good. He's got elite clutch numbers again, and he's a positive plus minus in the clutch. I just realized you couldn't see behind the comment, but he's one of the top-ish players in clutch play this year. And you think, this is a high volume. Look, this is 25 games of clutch play this year, and he's averaging 3.5 points, whereas the other guys, and this is, part of the issue with the Kings, they're in a bunch of close games. But you think about Jimmy, who's only played 9 clutch games, this is significant volume at 25 clutch games, right? We all know DeRozan's a pretty clutch player too, and Fox is, first of all, sharing the load with him. And let's go back a year or two to last year before DeRozan was there, and we'll do games greater than 20. Here was DeRozan last year, but again, Fox and Monk, they were their 2 clutch guys last season. Now Fox didn't have a good 3-point shooting year in the clutch 2 years ago, or last season, but 2 years ago he was elite in the clutch. And I think won the Clutch Player of the Year award. So I don't know, he's really good, honestly. So Chair here says, can the Spurs get away with the trade without trading Castle, Sohan, and CP3? I just assume the Kings are going to ask for at least one of those guys, but we love them here. Yes, Sohan's good. This is the thing that's funny. You can tell who watches Spurs games, because Jeremy Sohan has quickly become probably the most underrated player in the league. Jeremy Sohan's really good at a lot of different stuff. I think the Kings would want Sohan. I think the Kings would want Stephon Castle, one of the two. CP3, money-wise, maybe. Do I like Fox's fit with Vassell? Yeah. Vassell can shoot it. Vassell would be one of the best shooters that Fox has ever played with. I really love that fit, to be honest. I'm thinking about Fox and Wemby in the pick and pop game specifically. You could this is the crazy thing about Wembanyama. You could have Wembanyama ghosting screens. That's unheard of for a 7'4", 7'5" player. That's never been done before. Could you imagine Yao Ming doing that? That's just not something he would have ever done. That's what Wembanyama is as a player. He could ghost a screen, give De'Aaron Fox a own way to the rim, and if they double team Fox, or the big man has to step toward Fox on that ghost screen, you're going to have Wembanyama wide open on a pick and pop. Oh my goodness. And you could do the same thing with Vassell being a ghost screener. So Fox would be awesome with Wemby, honestly. It's funny because the other day I was talking about Trae Young being a brilliant fit with Wembanyama, and I agree. And it's kind of for different reasons. Wembanyama as a ghost screener would be great with Fox. Wembanyama as a short roller would be perfect with Trae Young. So it really comes down to what San Antonio internally decides that they want with Wemby. Do they want him ghost screening more? Do they want him playing on the perimeter more? Do they want him shooting more threes? Do they want him being a super high volume stretch big? Or do they want him working out of the pocket, playing like Joel Embiid? Do they want him, maybe colliding and crashing in on the glass more? Do they want him at the rim more? Where does San Antonio really want him? Right now they're giving him the leeway to figure it all out kind of on the fly. They've put him in a number of different spots in isolation, as the screen and roll guy, as the primary ball handler in ball screens. Like, they've done pretty much every single thing you could imagine with him, and he's been successful in almost every single play type because he's that good of a player. And now when it comes to team building, what kind of guard do you want to pair with him? So far, we got our answer through the draft. They didn't draft Dillingham. They traded that pick. They drafted Stephon Castle. They clearly wanted a defensive-minded guard who had cutting instincts and finishing abilities at the rim. And obviously, I think one thing that was always undersold was Castle's handle. I really liked his handle a lot when he was at UConn. I talked about that all draft cycle long. But Fox, I think, has a better first step than Stephon Castle. He's obviously very quick. He's also in his prime. So that's like the other thing here is if San Antonio is making this kind of trade, like, you're kind of taking the bet that Fox, he's better now because he's 27, right? So that's part of the thing. Cher here says, I would love Fox here, but my dream acquisition is Trae Young. I know this Fox trade is salivating because nobody ever wants to come to San Antonio. Would you pull this trigger or wait for Trae? To be honest with you, I would rather have Trae Young. I would. The 3-point percentage difference doesn't look significant between the two guys, but one player has elite 3-point shooting gravity, the other one doesn't, and we all know who is who in that conversation. I like Trae Young more than De'Aaron Fox, and I think for San Antonio specifically, with the defensive infrastructure they have, a deal with Atlanta makes more sense than a deal with Sacramento, given how many of the Hawks' future picks that the Spurs own currently. Like, a deal between those two teams kind of reverting back the DeJounte Murray trade in a way would make some sense. Although the question is, will Trae Young ever actually become available? Hawks ownership really likes him. They were integral in them even drafting him. And I don't know if the Hawks are looking to sell at all. And they might not over the next 2-3 years. So again, if you're San Antonio, you might be too patient if you wait for something like that. And I think that's an important thing to keep your mind on for sure. Brian K says, Sohan has made less than 15 shots outside of 10 feet all season. Love the defense and him playing at the rim, but if the shot doesn't come along, he's a very clunky offensive fit. Hard player to evaluate. So, Brian, I completely agree with you. And this is one of the things I had a lot of concerns about with Sohan coming out of Baylor. But I think right now what we can do with hindsight and knowing how things have unfolded since that draft, right? Since the 2022 NBA draft. At the time, we didn't know he would be Victor Wembanyama's future teammate. What we do know now, though, is he's with arguably the highest upside player in the league moving forward, who is a 7'5" player who can stretch the floor, handle the ball on the perimeter. He's with arguably the most talented 7-foot-plus guy we've seen in a long, long time. I'm not going to go too crazy. I think Wembanyama's ceiling is ridiculously high, though. And I think, Sohan does have some clunky offensive fits. I think if we're being completely honest, though, there's a lot of ways Sohan can still be super beneficial without shooting outside of 10 feet. Like, let's say San Antonio did get Trae Young. If you bring Sohan up as your primary ball screener with Trae Young, he's going to get blitz. Trae Young is going to get blitz. Teams will be okay with leaving Sohan open in the middle of the floor as your short roller. But that's where Sohan's kind of playmaking feel, some of the areas he's developed, and his ability as a driver slasher cutter type would make some sense if you put Wembanyama in the dunker spot. You think about how Golden State found so much success with Steph Curry and Draymond Green being his primary screener, whether it was Kevon Looney or Andrew Bogut sitting in the dunker spot. You basically supersize that now into San Antonio. Instead of having Steph Curry, if it was Trae Young or some other elite shooting guard that would draw those double teams, draw that attention off of ball screens, Sohan could fill somewhat of a Draymond type role. Not the same caliber of player. I'm not saying he's exactly Draymond 2.0, but I think there's a lot of ways to scheme success with the combination of Sohan and Wemby, just because of how big Wemby is, how good his touch is. Like, Wemby is so big that putting a small guy on him is just still not going to work. And he's too talented to put really, have big guys guarding him. So, I think, again, Sohan is a very hard player to actually evaluate in a vacuum. But luckily, we don't have to know that we're in a vacuum anymore. We know that we're talking about the San Antonio Spurs, and we know he has Victor Wembanyama as a teammate. So I think that's kind of the big thing here, honestly. Callie here says, yeah, otherwise I would have fired Mike Brown. I mean, Mike Brown did get fired. Isn't Jokic 7 feet? I mean, yeah. And I'm not slighting Nikola Jokic. I'm not. Victor Wembanyama, here's the thing. Victor Wembanyama is first in the NBA in three-pointers made that are 5 feet behind the three-point line. He's first. Not of 7-footers, of anybody. He has the most deep range threes in the NBA this season. More than LaMelo, more than Trae Young, more than Steph Curry, more than Damian Lillard. He's 7'5", okay? And he's a far better defender than Nikola Jokic. Sure, he's not the passer. There's a lot of things that Nikola Jokic is far better at right now. Nikola Jokic is also in his late 20s, okay? Victor Wembanyama is in his early 20s. He's like just roughly like newly 20 plus years old, okay? He's extremely young. So I think like if we're being completely honest here, like when we're talking about long-term upside, Wembanyama, there's like a real chance we're talking about like the greatest player ever to play. And I don't think that's, anything crazy. One thing I do want to look at here, I want to look at some of the tracking data here for De'Aaron Fox and specifically where his attempts are coming. So if you look at his pull-up volume, this is one thing that, again, teams should be really excited about when you're thinking about like a guy stepping up in the playoffs, and you think about the one De'Aaron Fox playoff series we've seen against Golden State. He was stellar in that series against Golden State. It's because he has a game that is tailor-made to fit into the playoffs. Shoots a lot of pull-up jump shots, exerts downhill pressure, can drive and kick, has a lively handle, has the quickness to get into transition, score in early transition, make plays out of early transition. And he turns advantages into buckets. Like those are the things De'Aaron Fox is just really great at. And like exactly, like he like I know the Kings didn't win the playoff series, but De'Aaron Fox was the reason that went to 7 games. De'Aaron Fox was so good. Like Domantas Sabonis kind of had a rough series in some ways. Obviously, the Draymond Green stomp on his chest, like that was not a clean series in any way either between Sabonis and Draymond, that whole situation, but. Like De'Aaron was unbelievable. So, and this is why, like he's got a game that fits the playoffs very, very well. Like shoots a lot of pull-up 3-point volume. Like he's a very good player. Like his numbers split between catch and shoot and pull-ups are almost equivalent for threes, which is again, like that shows combination fit. Like he's played in unique systems before. He's found success playing off the ball around Sabonis a bit. He's obviously extremely athletic. Like, I think the big concern here is just like the overall 3-point success isn't great. And like a lot of it, again, comes off of the dribble. But even when he's been a stationary catch and shoot guy, he's not shooting super well on that, 32% from 3. So like that's part of the problem here too. Like this is where the difference between De'Aaron Fox and Trae Young, I think, is an essential thing to know. And people are like, this is a real possibility. Like, let's go back to the report here. And I think this is an essential thing to consider. Let's read back what Charania said. The Kings are expected to open up talks to potentially deal All-Star De'Aaron Fox. Potentially. I don't think the Kings are just going to rush to make a trade. They're going to scour the market. They're going to involve a bunch of different teams. They're going to try and figure out the best thing for the Kings to do long-term. And that's exactly what should happen. You should hope that your GM, that your president of basketball operations, that your franchise, your organization operates in the way that is best for your franchise, your organization, your team. And that's what the Kings are going to do here. Like, now this is important news because I don't think any of us truly expected the Kings to really readily make De'Aaron Fox available. I think over the last 15, 20 years, De'Aaron Fox is the best example of draft and development in Sacramento. He has been a huge success story. You think back to that draft, Jason Tatum goes 3rd overall. You think about Lonzo Ball 2nd overall. Like Lonzo and Markelle Fultz were heavily regarded as the 2 best guards in the draft. De'Aaron Fox went after both of them and has been the best guard from that draft between those 3. So with that in mind, that's trading him isn't just like we decided to trade him because he doesn't want to be here any longer. It's also like an organizational shift because it's one of the few guys that you actually drafted, developed, kept, and saw progression with, and made a playoff appearance with, and went to a Game 7 with, and he balled out in the playoffs. So SP here says 5-team deal. Spurs get Fox, Kyle Anderson. Heat get Bruce Brown, Gary Payton II, Trey Jones, Kuminga. Kings get Wiggins, Castle, Jovic. Warriors get Butler. Raptors get Harrison Barnes, Bassey, add picks. So Here's the thing with this. I just don't know if I see Miami going after Jonathan Kuminga, especially if they're giving up both Butler and Jovic. Like, I guess if you're saying add picks, like maybe, but I don't think Jovic gets traded. I think that's one of the biggest things here in this is I would just not see that. Brew Crew here says Fox would look good on the Bucks next to Giannis. He would. I just don't see that really happening now with Dame there. Obviously, for Milwaukee, you'd look at it as getting younger and a little bit cheaper even over the next couple of years. But I just don't think that's going to be realistically what happens. Although, you know what? Again, I don't think this is going to happen. Okay, so keep that in mind. If you're watching this right now, I don't think this is going to happen. But again, so there would be things that have to happen here, right? Like the Bucks would have to get out of the second apron for this, okay? Because they'd have to aggregate salaries. There'd have to be other things that happen for this to work. Like Pat Connaughton would have to get traded first, but something like it's going to say failed. Okay, I already knew it was going to say failed, right? Because of this. But this is something that, like, maybe the Bucks would do something like this. I don't know. It's not like the craziest thing in the world. Again, it's going to say failed because of the Bucks would have to salary dump Pat Connaughton somewhere first. There would have to be moving pieces in that, but it would be funny to see. Cher here says getting Fox is great and all, but what are your thoughts on our backup center issue? Who do you think that's available? And are any of them realistic acquisitions for the season? If you're talking about San Antonio, I don't really see the Spurs honestly making a bunch of win now moves right now. Like, Jock Landale, maybe, like someone who's going to be really easy to get, like Drew Eubanks from Utah. Like, there's not anyone out there that's going to probably patch up your center spot. I could see the Spurs taking in Nurkic in some kind of multi-team trade. Nurkic has been awful this season, but maybe a change of scenery, new coaching staff, all that stuff would help him. I don't know. But yeah, like that's the other thing too. I don't think the Warriors would give up Kuminga for Kuminga and Wiggins in a deal for Butler compared to just going out and getting Fox. Randy here says Stephon Cass will not be a part of any deal. Very likely not. We've talked about that at length. Brett Van Vliet says Trey has no chance of getting traded at this deadline, or would it be more expensive than Fox? I mean, I don't want to ever say never. Like 97, 98, 99% of the NBA is always tradable. Always tradable. I think Trae Young fits into that attainable category. But the trade here would get very complicated very quickly because you need salary. Trae Young makes a bit more than De'Aaron Fox, so you're seeing kind of the money issues here already. Trey Jones maybe goes back in this, and then you're looking at 1, 2, like every Atlanta thing goes back to Atlanta because that's what the Hawks would need at least to consider this. And then there's also going to be other stuff that would have to go in return too. So it would need to look something like this. You're basically sending 5 draft assets, Keldon Johnson, Trey Jones, for Trae Young, which I think this makes the Spurs a lot better. I really do. But yeah, that's kind of my thoughts on that. Fox to Nola, says Cali Trucker. Not really sure. Samuel McMahon says NBA Central. Let's go take a look at what NBA Central's got to say. This is another guy to be careful of. I would not trust this report. I would stray away from this. I don't remember what it was. I think he was saying that Damian Lillard was going to be a Raptor. I don't know. He was super wrong about something. Let's look at NBA Central. Not Centel. We're not going to click Centel. We're going to go to Central. The Miami Heat are engaged with the Golden State Warriors and Phoenix Suns on a potential Jimmy Butler trade per Shams Charania. Oh, that might have gotten deleted. Oh, no, it's still there. Not shocking. These have been the 2 leaders in the clubhouse. So, like, those are the two teams that I thought were very realistically going to go out and make some type of move. That is per Sham Charania. This is per James Ham NBA, which co-host of the Insiders for ESPN 1320, covers the Kings for Kings Beat. I mean, maybe. We'll see what ultimately happens, but I don't know. I'm not really sure. We'll see what happens. Tim says Vassell would be even better as a third option. Currently playing as a second option, really good player. I think Vassell is meant to be like a Chris Middleton type player. That was my comp for him coming out of Florida State, and I say that in a really good way. You think about the role Chris Middleton played for Milwaukee en route to a championship in 2021. Gary here says the Kings are smart to start the bidding. I think they're just looking at offers just in case somebody's willing to give up way too much. Definitely something that they're going to consider. I think, Gary, you're right. Like, they're just trying to start a market, and that's why the rumors come out today. John G says, awesome, man. Thanks for the info, and go Spurs go. Appreciate you, John. Glad to have you in here today. Appreciate all of you guys. Brew Crew says, are there any legitimate rumors around the Bucks? Zach LaVine, Brew Crew. Just like I talked about in my last stream, Zach LaVine to Milwaukee is one that I continue to think makes a ton of sense. And there's pathways to get there. Again, it really hinges on salary dumping Pat Connaughton, getting below the second apron so that you can aggregate other salaries together. Like, I think Zach LaVine to Milwaukee is a real possibility. A very real possibility, honestly. Dave here says Fox will go to a non-contending team this year. I mean, we'll see. Tomas wants to know what teams could be interested in Kelly Olynyk. I think the Clippers would be a home run fit. Brian K says Vassell offensively could be Middleton. Defensively, I don't think so much. I don't think so, but yeah, I mean, like that's a good point too. Like, I think the hard thing for me too, Brian, is like when it comes to comparisons for NBA draft prospects. Like, first of all, it's very hard to find comparisons in general because players are just different. Like, they don't all do the same thing. They're not, the shot diet's not going to look completely the same. Obviously, like body frame, like play types, just all going to be like slightly different. So for me, instead of looking at just specifically like what they're going to be as an overall all-around two-way player, like I think you're kind of looking for an archetype. And I thought, Vassell, kind of off-ball guard who can score, create a little bit with the ball in his hands, but doesn't need the ball to be an effective player. And defensively, like a lot of that comes down to team scheme. With the way that Milwaukee under Budenholzer was limiting transition, and trying to run teams off the three-point line for a while, especially out of the corners. With Brook Lopez anchoring the paint, I think there was a lot of ways that Budenholzer did a good job, obviously covering for Chris Middleton. And then also Middleton was just a solid defender. So like my comps are never like, oh, I think this player is exactly going to be that guy. It's just more so like what archetype, what kind of role, and what kind of like skill level offensively, especially does that kind of mirror to in the NBA. And I think that's I don't think Vassell is bad defensively either. Red Van Vliet, I just don't like I think Middleton was like I think a level above him, but also some of that comes with maturity. Like, so we'll see what Vassell looks like when he's like 28 defensively, because like that's at that point. And Brian, to your point too, like this is another great point. Like Vassell was a part of Florida State, and if you guys haven't watched the Seminoles, like Leonard Hamilton has those guys guarded. That's where premium defensive prospects come out of Florida State for a reason. And Leonard Hamilton's a great defensive coach. And that's probably part of why you thought Vassell was going to be an elite defender, and I thought, or excellent at least is what you said, not elite. I don't want to misquote you, but it also comes down to like I think defending in the NBA is so much different than defending in college or defending anywhere else because of the reliance on scheme, the importance of an overall collective good defensive team unit. I still wouldn't like sell out the Vassell defensive stuff, but I think like he's not gonna. I don't think he'll be excellent, like you're saying. I think like he's going to be an okay defender, a solid to good defender if things like when he's 27, 28 years old. Gene, welcome to the stream, says, hey, what are the chances of Golden State getting Fox? They can reasonably match contracts along with picks for Fox. I think you're right. All the stuff does on paper make some sense, but I think one of the big concerns for Golden State is they're already a small team. They're currently 11th in the Western Conference. Does an all-in trade, does a push-in trade for De'Aaron Fox actually make long-term sense? I don't know. Obviously, you have the Curry brand tie. You have De'Aaron Fox basically almost requesting a trade on Draymond Green's podcast about a month ago. Like, there's a lot of things that point to a sensible connection there between Fox and Golden State and some of Golden State's players. But at the end of the day, I just don't know if we legitimately know that quite yet as like a realistic landing spot, just given where Golden State currently is positioned as a team, both now and long-term, looking at the age of their roster. Randy says, I would trade Vassell and a pick for Ingram. I would not do that. I think Brandon Ingram, very talented player. I think there are some challenges of winning with him. And a lot of that stems from pace, the overall shot selection. He's very reliant on mid-range pull-up shots. And obviously, I think the... hold on, I'm looking at news here. Okay. I just think like Ingram's injury history, all that stuff is kind of difficult. Depleted Mind says Fox, Castle, Vassell, Sohan, and Wemby starting five. That's a very, very good starting five if they're able to get that. A pretty good blend of defense, length, size, athleticism, playmaking across the lineup a bit with Castle, Fox, Sohan. Obviously, Wemby does everything. So, John Hamilton says, what about quickly for Fox? Salaries match plus picks, obviously. So, I just don't know if I see Sacramento wanting Emmanuel quickly, to be completely honest. Let's get the Kings back in the trade machine, and we'll go throw in the Toronto Raptors. So Fox making $34.8 million. Here's Quickly. Let's look at Quickly's contract, $32.5 million a year. Like, again, I just don't know if this is a trade that the Kings are super enamored with. Like, and then the question is, okay, well, what picks? And if you're Toronto, like, this kind of seems risky. Like, yeah, Fox is better than Emmanuel Quickly. Your team would be a bit better, but like, how good is this version of the Raptors, right? Now, I'm not saying Masai Ujiri won't do this, but if this is your roster, Fox, Barrett, Brown, Pirtle, Olynyk, Boucher, Barnes, Davion Mitchell, Grady Dick, like, you're an okay team. I just don't think you're like getting out of the first round. For sure not. So, I that's part of why I don't think there's a real route there. Elijah says, you think Mitch Johnson's a future head coach? Yes, I definitely think so. I think he's probably going to be the Spurs' next head coach, to be completely honest with you. After Popovich, I think Mitch Johnson will probably be his successor there in San Antonio, honestly. So, Brett Dryberg says, Rockets, I still think a possibility. Not one that I would necessarily bet on, but I think it is a possibility. Rogue Brother says, could the Clippers jump in and get either Barnes or Johnson off of Spurs? Maybe Barnes. And I've talked about this before too. Let's pull up the trade machine again. This is a good question and one that I do think is worth addressing. So let's just go grab something here. So Harrison Barnes makes $18 million. And the Clippers have this PJ Tucker contract to work with, and they could maybe include Terrence Mann in a deal, which I would not hate. They could include Bones Highland in a deal. And they have the one thing that they could do is this 2031 pick, some type of protection on it, right? Something like this. And the money right now does work, I believe. So, I mean, the Spurs are accumulating assets in the future. And something like that, like that's an overpay in my opinion for Harrison Barnes. Like, I would not do that. If I was the Clippers, I would try and do something like, well, undo that. I would try and, if I was doing something, which I don't even think I'd be trading for Harrison Barnes if I was the Clippers, but like if I was, I would try and at least make it 2 seconds and not a first. But Max says, I want Fox to be a Rocket, but I don't want them to give up what it's going to take to get him. See, this is part of the problem. You want to trade for something good, you have to give up something good in the NBA, and that's always my favorite discussion with fans during the trade deadline season, because everyone wants to know what they are going to get without having to know what they're going to give up. And that's always the scary game you play when it comes to making trades in the NBA. Francis Sheck says Ingram is kind of turning into an afterthought in the current NBA. I would not be surprised if he would have to stay in NOLA post-deadline or past the deadline. I mean, possibly. Let's go over to this real quick because I do want to pull it up because I think it is a timely thing to talk about real quick. StatMuse just posted Stephon Castle among rookies. Second in points, third in assists, third in steals, first in free throws. Most points per game by a Spurs rookie guard in the last 30 years. How mad do you think my Spurs fans are going to get at this? I'm kind of joking. I'm going to put ... though, just to make sure everyone still gets mad at me. Oh, man. But yeah, no, Castle's been having a pretty good year. Keyshawn here says, I don't see how this is King's chaos. I've been saying this has been needed for more depth, money, and youth. I mean, here's the thing. I said it earlier, but I'll say it again. 4 quarters don't make $1 in the NBA. You could trade De'Aaron Fox for 4 good depth players. The Kings will not be better. And that's just the reality. Like, De'Aaron Fox is a good player. I know the 3-point shot's been inconsistent, but he does a lot of really good things. And I do think it's going to be San Antonio. And again, the thing I want to leave everyone with, whichever NBA star is smart enough to say I'm only willing to re-sign with San Antonio, so trade me to the Spurs, will reap the benefits of playing with the top 5 player in the history of the game. Wemby's going to be that good. Wemby's going to be the generational player of this generation. He is the guy that people will remember. He is the player that will change the course of NBA history. He might not be LeBron. He might not be Michael Jordan, but he's going to be this generation's iteration of that. He's going to be that influence, that type of player who changes the course of NBA history and really excites a lot of fans and excites a lot of people in France and excites a lot of Spurs fans, especially. Like, Wembanyama is the guy. And I think with that, like, whatever player is smart enough to get there first to play with him is going to be really, really happy. Gene says for Minnesota, for Randall and picks, that would be a dream. So here's the issue, too. I'll leave you with this. Minnesota doesn't really have picks, like, at all. They have the Pistons pick this year. They have this one. Otherwise, like, Stepien rule means you can't trade this one. They don't even have their 2031 first because of the trade with San Antonio on draft night for Rob Dillingham. So you really don't have a pathway, like, to getting anyone good because no one wants Julius Randle, really. Like, Julius Randle's a fine player, maybe Miami, but I don't know. I don't think the Kings would want Julius Randle in anything. And, you know, this Pistons first. I think you're going to need a lot more than that. And they're a second apron team, so they can't aggregate salaries. They can't take in more salary than they're trading out. They have X, Y, and Z rules against them as to why they can't make a trade. So there's just going to be a lot of problems along the way for teams. But, yeah, I hope you guys have enjoyed. Remember the big news, and this is the essential part here. The Sacramento Kings are expected to open up talks to, again, quote unquote, potentially deal all-star guard De'Aaron Fox ahead of the February 6th trade deadline. Really hope you guys have enjoyed the live stream here at Utility Sports. If you have, be sure to leave a like. I'm going to check how many likes we're at on the stream right now. I want to see that like number grow. So everyone smash that like button right now. We're over 100 likes. I want to get that number way higher. We have 300 people watching live right now. Everyone smash that like button before we conclude today's live stream. Make sure you guys go check out Utility Sports Twitter. Link is in the description for that. I'll send it in here now as well so that you guys don't miss it. Because I want to make sure you guys all go follow over on Twitter. Sending that link into the comment section now. Make sure you are watching for it. There is that link. Go give us a follow over on Twitter. Also, go join the Utility Sports Discord. Link, again, is in the description. Would love to have you guys in there. And don't forget, we are going to have trade deadline live streams all next week. So if you liked what you saw today, make sure you guys stick around for future ones. Brian, glad to have you in here, man. We always appreciate your thoughts in the Discord as well. Cher, thanks so much for being in here. Gene, really glad to have you in here as well today. You asked some great questions. Really appreciate you guys all so much. And again, everyone, make sure you join that Discord. I'm going to send the Discord link in here now too for everyone to go join in there. It's a great basketball community. A lot of fun topics and discussions in there. That is in the description as well. So everyone go join that. Appreciate you guys all so much. And we'll catch you in the very next Utility Sports video.